Whether you're a developer or a tester, chances are you've seen plenty of bugs in your career. Hi, I'm Chris Harbert from Testery, and today I'm going to talk about 10 ways that experienced developers troubleshoot issues. I've been in the industry for about 20 years now, and I've seen a lot of bugs. Many were easy to figure out, and some were difficult. So I thought it would be helpful to share my tips and tricks of what I've learned over the years for how to troubleshoot software issues. This seems kind of obvious, but the first step is to go into the system and try to reproduce the issue. Typically, a bug report is going to include some context of what the user was doing, what steps they tried, if you're lucky. And going through these steps and seeing if you can reproduce the issue is the best way to get started. Sometimes you'll go in and you'll see, maybe the system is down completely, or maybe you'll see that they had a usability issue and maybe didn't quite understand how the system worked. And so going through that is going to be the first step to figure out what the issue is. It's also a good way to start collecting your diagnostic information. The next step is to take a look at any logs, error messages, and alerts that you have. If you're not currently writing your logs to a system that's searchable and running monitoring and alerting on top of them, now is the best time to get that in place. You're really going to appreciate having that in place when your next production issue happens. If you do have logs, you're going to want to look for any stack traces. Pay very close attention to what line of the stack trace is actually causing the issue, as well as the lines before and after it. Sometimes a stack trace will include a lot of libraries that belong to your organization, as well as libraries that don't belong to your organization. And it's important to keep in mind that the issue can happen in any of these places. So taking a look at the stack trace is an important step. But what if you don't have a stack trace? Well, the next thing I like to do is take a look at what's changed since the last time it was working. And there are a few different things that can change since the last time it was working. It could be data in the database that's changed. It could be code that was deployed. So doing things like taking a look at the production version and doing a git diff to a previous version of the code, taking a look at what data records have been created since the last time things were working. Those types of things can help your mind focus on what's changed. And 9 times out of 10, issues that you haven't seen before that you're seeing for the first time are related to changes that have been made since the last time you made changes. So it's important to keep an open mind and look at all of these things. It's not necessarily going to find the issue, but it's a great place to start. If this information isn't enough, I like to also add additional logging, monitoring, and alerting. You can never have enough logging, monitoring, and alerting, so it's always good to add more into the mix. Now, you can always tune down the logging later on, so you can set different classes to log at different logging levels if you end up writing too much to the logs. But it's a lot easier to take logs out of production than it is to add logs to the production code when they don't exist. So you can't see logs if you're not writing them. And so if you don't have enough logs to figure out this issue, it's generally a good idea to add some additional logs, monitoring and alerting to help you see what's going on, not only to figure out this particular issue, but also to fix issues going forward. Perhaps the most useful technique I've used over the years is to take a complex system and remove layers of complexity until things start working again. So today's systems are built up of a lot of complex layers. We're using different libraries. We have different data. We have different APIs. And so taking these layers of complexity out of the problem until you get something to work can really help you see where the issue is happening and isolate that issue to a specific piece of code or module or service or type of data that's in your environment. A similar technique is to start with something simple that works and then add the complexity back in until you get something that doesn't work anymore. So which approach you take kind of depends on the particular situation and where you think the issue might be. But being able to do this can really help you isolate the issue and figure out what's going on in your system. We can't talk about troubleshooting without talking about the debugger. So honestly, I'm not a huge fan of the debugger. I got my start in the early days doing test-driven development. And when you do test-driven development and you have automated tests, you don't find yourself using the debugger quite as much because the tests kind of tell you what the code is doing. But one technique that's definitely helpful is to walk through the code using a debugger and inspect the different variables along the way. You can look for things like, whether or not a variable is, null or unassigned, whether it's an empty string when it shouldn't be. Things like that really pop out at you when you're using a debugger, the way that they wouldn't if you're not using a debugger. But another important troubleshooting step really takes place before the bug is ever reported, and that's becoming familiar with different types of bugs and how to spot them. And this is such an important topic. We're going to do a whole series of videos on this. So if you're interested in learning more about common bugs and how to spot them, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. And finally, always write an automated test to reproduce the issue. This not only proves that you know how to reproduce the issue and where the issue is taking place in the system, it also helps you make sure that your code is working. So you go from a failing test to a passing test as you fix the code. And it'll serve future builds to be able to make sure that the issue doesn't reintroduce itself. And there's nothing more embarrassing than having the same bug happen multiple times. I hope you found these tips useful. For similar tips, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us on LinkedIn or Twitter.